to look at before we get there. And you can either follow along with me through Google Slides or just by the PowerPoints that I got up here. Either way. Hold on. A few adjustments. There we go. Yes. She did. We're going to squeeze in as much as we can. If you don't finish anything, you just got to make sure you do it at home because everything is due today. Your quiz, your packet, your review sheet, all of it. Come on. Sorry, I am experiencing some slight technical difficulties right this second. Okay. All right, so we've got a very busy week this week. We've got your unit stuff due this week, and then we also have your shoot. I can't multitask. Not working out very well for me right this minute. Well. There we go. Okay. All right. Finally got it. Maybe. All right, ladies and gentlemen, let's take a second and let's talk about it. All right. We are in our last 13 regular school days. This week and next week are your last 2 full 5-day weeks. Okay. So I need you to give me everything that you can. All that I will accept at this point in time is anything that is in T6. So anything that is currently in PowerSchool, anything that is in Google Classroom is all that I will accept. All right. Your mission at this point in time is to try and get everything into me that you currently have a 0 on, so that we can look and see what that does to your overall F1 grade. And then we will reevaluate from there. If you were lucky enough to get the special little star because you have a C, D, or F as your F1 overall, don't forget that 2 weeks from Wednesday. 2 weeks from Wednesday is final exam, teacher-made exam. Make sure that you are here or that you are prepared to take it online. If you're not a fan of staring at a computer for an hour, I don't know that I would choose to do it online, but whatever floats your boat. Okay. All right. Any questions, comments, or concerns before we just get into it and get it done today? No, we're okay. Sunshine, do me a favor and take your earbuds out for me so I know you're listening. I know you're ready for your unit quiz today. We've got to be on it. Okay. All right. Now, couple of things. What is on your unit quiz today will also be on your triple chapter unit test on Thursday. So you can't put it in and then forget it after today, okay? Because everything that we've talked about last week and this week is going on your unit test on Thursday. And then if you have to take the final exam, everything that's going to be on Thursday's test will also be the last unit of questions that'll be on your final exam as well. So again, that's coming up 2 weeks from this Wednesday. All right, so last week we talked about a lot of people. We're going to tie up all these loose ends. We learned some Latin. I don't know if you even realized that. We learned some Latin last week. De facto, all right, is Latin. De facto segregation is talking about a custom, all right? So de facto is way of life, all right? A way of life in the United States, and this is North and South, all right? We talked about how it was kind of ingrained ever since, especially Plessy versus Ferguson, the idea of separation of the races. Now, tell me this is going to be on your quiz today. Give me 100% right here. Stay with me. You good?
I'm trying to get I have a surgery Friday and
Okay. You need to step out and finish?
No, I'm good now.
All right, so we talked about 2 Supreme Court cases. Both are going to be on your quiz today, and then both are going to be on your test on Thursday. So we know Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896, makes segregation legal. And then last week, we talked about Brown versus Board of Education, 1954, that makes segregation illegal. So the idea that now we are completely changing society and moving away, moving towards integration. Make sure you know the difference. Segregation is separation of the races. Integration is bringing society together. So here's the issue. The big question for right now is, where do we go from here? What change have we seen? What are we still working towards? We see a lot of progress towards political equality. We've got the Civil Rights Act of 1964 that gets rid of literacy test, grandfather clause. We've got the poll tax they get rid of it with the 24th Amendment. And we put in the Voting Rights Act of 65. So we're putting towards a lot of work, political progress. But what about economically? What about socially? So the issue is a lot of frustration is coming because we see that there's still a separation, there's still a divide. And unfortunately, mid to late 60s, you see a change in philosophy. Some people are starting to abandon what Dr. King had been building from the 50s into the 60s. Now, he was an advocate for nonviolent protesting, nonviolent demonstrations, turn the other cheek. Whereas we see some new groups and new ideas emerge in the mid to late 60s. Unfortunately, we do see a lot of violence happening mid to late 60s. Medgar Evers, who was a civil rights activist and spokesperson, is going to be assassinated in the 60s, as well as Dr. King, Robert Kennedy, and several others. And we'll talk about Malcolm X today as well. So the new question is, should self-defense be used? Should a simulation now be the goal? And a simulation is the idea of, should the African-American community still work to ingrain itself in American trends and society's ideas, or should they separate themselves? And even fashion trends. Even fashion trends and things, we notice a change from the 40s, 50s into the 60s and 70s to where African Americans move away from adopting what had been in popular culture as how to do hair, clothing trends. And that's why we see it become very popular in late 60s into the 70s, with the idea of the Afro being a very popular trend in hair, because that was something that the African American community wanted to push as far as their look and changing from the ideal society look. All right, now, a couple of new groups, people, and organizations. We'll talk about who this guy is here in just a second. The Nation of Islam is also going to be pushing and advocating for a new look and attitude for African Americans. So Elijah Muhammad, pictured here, Elijah Muhammad is going to be the leader of the Black Nation of Islam, and they're going to be pushing and advocating for the idea of African Americans separating themselves from society, building on their own culture and religion. Separating from communities, separating themselves from whites and others, trying to work on teaching self-respect and encouraging self-defense. Now, even though Elijah Muhammad is going to be the leader of the Black Nation of Islam, we have a spokesperson who is really going to become the image of the Nation of Islam, and that's Malcolm X. Now, his birth name is Malcolm Little. And he gets introduced to the Nation of Islam and the ideas. And he changes his name. He says, I am changing my name because that is not my ancestors' name. Because if you go back to the time of slavery, a slave was not allowed to learn how to read and write. So if they had to sign a form, or if they had to write on something, they usually just said, make your mark. And when they would make their mark, 9 times out of 10, it was usually maybe an X or something. So he said, I am adopting the X as my last name because my true last name has been lost to my ancestors during the time of slavery. But even then, the last name of a slave was usually the plantation owner's last name. It was not their family's last name. So he changes his name. He becomes known as Malcolm X. He is going to be the face and spokesperson of the Black Nation of Islam, who is pushing separation from white society and pushing using self-defense. So here's another interesting thing. Now, Malcolm X is going to go on a pilgrimage. He's going to go on a journey to the holy city in the Middle East. He's going to go and almost kind of find himself while he's gone. Now, when he comes back, he changes his ideals and unfortunately does not stick with the same ideals as the Black Nation of Islam, and he will be assassinated in 1965 because he is trying to break away from some of the ideas. And he actually is assassinated by a member of the Black Nation of Islam. All right, Stokely Carmichael is another guy we're going to talk about today. Stokely Carmichael, who had originally been part of the SNCC, the Students for a Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, again, like many Americans, is really frustrated that he has not seen the change come about that he would have liked to have. So he creates the idea, the concept of Black Power, to where he is pushing for, yeah, we've seen a lot of change happen politically with African Americans, but let's see change all the way around, socially, politically, economically. And the idea of the Black Power movement is to advocate for equal rights in all areas, as well as supporting the idea of the African American community. So the image is the raised closed fist. I don't know if you guys have even noticed this. I haven't really paid attention to like sports and TV a whole lot this year, but I know I saw it last year to where a lot of professional athletes are continuing, even today, 2020, 2021, continuing the Black Power movement, which again is symbolized by the raised closed fist, which is the symbol that you would see, and again, comes alive during the mid-1960s and still continues. So Stokely Carmichael is going to advocate and push for that. And then we also, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to skip ahead. But I said last week, the 1960s. Now, the pivotal year is 1968. 1968, we see more death, more violence, more assassinations, more riots pop out, but a lot of it starts in the early 60s. Unfortunately, again, 1965, we see Malcolm X is going to be murdered by one of his own, again, his new ideas. He originally said, yes, we should push for self-defense. But then after his pilgrimage to Mecca and the Holy City, he comes back and he said, you know what? I really believe that Dr. King is right in what he's saying. That if you try and meet fire with fire, you're not going to make anything better. So when his new views start to clash with the Nation of Islam, unfortunately, he's going to be assassinated by a rival member when in New York in 1965. We start to see so many great leaders taken way too early. And there is a movie about him, especially if you're a Will Smith fan. If you're a Will Smith fan, Will Smith plays him in the movie Malcolm X. Just throwing that out there if you like movies. But things seem to get worse instead of better. We have what we call the long hot summer of 1966, to where again, hostility, things are getting worse instead of better. Change is not happening. A lot of people thought that things were better in northern cities, that northern cities and northern states were more accepting than southern states, but that really was not true. Now, it might be better in certain places than others, but a lot of people didn't know that even in northern cities, we were still seeing rioting happen, that it wasn't better in Pennsylvania and in New York and in California, like a lot of people believed. A lot of northern minorities were really upset that they were not seeing the end of segregation like what they had hoped. And we see more violent outbursts and riots continuing to take place. We also have the Black Panthers that will be organized in the mid-1960s. We've got Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, who found the Black Panthers out in California. And again, these individuals have been watching and pushing and wanting to see change, but just have not seen it happen, and started to push for the idea, again, of using self-defense versus what Dr. King had pushed with nonviolent protests. So the idea of how many times can I be slapped in the face before I just cannot take it anymore? So we start to see the turning point in the ideals that are happening in the 1960s. Another big thing that will kind of be one of the straws that breaks the camel's back, so to speak, if you've ever heard the expression, is that, and we'll talk about it tomorrow, but Vietnam was another thing that was just adding more fuel to the fire. If you've ever heard the expression, a rich man's war and a poor man's fight, you might have heard it in reference to the Civil War. Well, that's going to be true too for Vietnam. Here's why. When Vietnam gets started in the early 60s, there is something new that pops up, and it's the idea of deferment. So if you are a boy between the ages of 18 and 25, you're the ones that are getting ready to be drafted. About lost the word there for a second. To be drafted to war, to go fight in Vietnam. However, the new word is deferment. And deferment meant that you could, if you got drafted, you could put in for a deferment if you were either accepted into college, get ready to go into college, or you were currently in college, you could defer your entry into the military until after you finished. So let's say you're 18, you just got drafted, but you're planning on going to ECU in August in the fall. Then you could submit your deferment to go into the military later. But not everybody can afford to go to college. So those that have the money, middle and upper class Americans that had the money, would defer, especially if they didn't want to go to war, they would defer their entry, which meant lower class Americans that didn't have that option automatically got drafted. And that's where a lot of frustration came into play of, and how is that fair? How is that fair that I'm being forced to go and fight for a country that will not give me full equal rights? So that, among many things, was on the agenda for the Black Panthers group. I'll show you a picture. So they kind of have a uniform look, usually dressing in all black, the black berets, and usually heavily armed, advocating for the safety of African-American women and children, pushing for military exemptions that should include all classes, all groups of people, etc. So again, another reminder that 1968 is a horribly awful, terrible year. We're going to lose yet another advocate for the civil rights movement. 1968. So Dr. King, who has been touring all over the United States, predominantly pushing in the South, is in Memphis, Tennessee. Excuse me, I got choked. Is in Memphis, Tennessee, going out and speaking at local churches. Well, the night before, he was at a church and he had just finished speaking, and the quote, "I'm not afraid to die." And many people have spoken to him about this, and he said, I know it, I feel it, I know that it's coming. I know that death is coming for me. I know that there's too many people out there that don't like what I stand for, what I represent. And very similar to so many other individuals. Abraham Lincoln is another one that he had received numerous death threats, and he actually kept a folder. He actually kept a folder of all the letters of death threats that he had received, and he knew it was coming too. But Dr. King said, "I am not afraid to die." And that very next day, he's going to be on the balcony of his hotel, leaving his hotel room, and James Earl Ray is his assassin. He was on the neighboring building, the rooftop of the neighboring building, shoots and kills Dr. King, 1968. And the heartbreaking reality of it is that this, for a lot of people, was like the final straw. Unfortunately, what happens is that we see riots break out all across the United States. And I know that really would hurt him because it's the opposite of what he advocated for. He wanted nonviolent protesting. He wanted citizens to work hard to achieve it through other means. But unfortunately, this was too much for a lot of people. And we see riots break out all across the United States after his death. Again, another one in 1968, Robert Kennedy, nicknamed Bobby, the youngest of the Kennedy brothers. Here's a good review question for Thursday. When was JFK assassinated? 1963, very good, yeah. So his younger brother, or youngest, I should say, his youngest brother is going to run for the presidency in 1968. He runs as a Democrat. He's going to be out in California, campaigning out in California. He will be shot and killed. His assassin is Sharon. He too, just like his older brother, was advocating and pushing for civil rights. And again, unfortunately, we see 1968 be such a big year. We lose so many people, so many leaders, way too young. And I threw this in as just a side note. So Nixon will win the 1968 election. Nixon will bring us through the end of the 60s into the 70s. But just to see so many of these great leaders lost so soon. All right, so let's wrap it up. Are we done with civil rights? No. Are we still fighting for civil rights? Yes. So this is a breakdown of what we have seen come through the 50s into the 60s. We don't really talk about it much just because we don't have time to hit on everything. It was actually on your ID sheet to define, talking about the Kerner Commission, blaming racism on what was happening in inner cities, that cities were not doing enough to make sure they met that end for civil rights. We do see the segregation is made illegal officially by the 1954 Brown versus Board of Education decision. We have 3 major laws that come out to support the civil rights movement. Civil Rights Act of 64, Voting Rights Act of 65, and then the Civil Rights Act of 68 that outlaws discrimination when selling houses, selling land, selling property, and renting houses or property. We do see a greater pride in the African American community as they come together, unite, and continue to push for change. And we're not done talking about it yet. We're just going to kind of hit the pause button as we get ready to get into Vietnam for tomorrow. All right, ladies and gentlemen, I know it's been a lot. We have squeezed a lot of information in 2 days last week and today. Let's see how much you remember. All right, we're finishing your Civil Rights Study Guide first. I believe, if I'm not mistaken, last week we stopped on question number 14. So that's where we're picking up today. Question 14, and then we will go to your packet from there. All right, here we go. So we did 14, we're going into 15. All right. All right, here we go. 15 says, what federal law finally guaranteed voting rights to African Americans? This was actually your bell ringer question. Hold on, back it up. This one is actually, I should have reworded it differently. It's actually talking about an amendment. What number amendment will guarantee voting rights? 15. 15th Amendment guarantees voting rights to and it should say African American males. This is another good review question. When do women get the right to vote? The 19th. Very good. Yeah. All right, 16. Who is Medgar Evers? No, no. He's a civil rights activist who was going to be assassinated in 1964. Civil rights activist. He is one of many who will be assassinated in the 1960s. All right, number 17, what religious group emerged to challenge African Americans to form separate communities from whites? Religious group should be the key phrase. Yeah, you did say it. Okay, yes, Black Nation of Islam. Black Nation of Islam is going to emerge and start pushing and advocating for African Americans to separate. Now, we talked about two people in particular, but number 18 wants to know who's the lead spokesperson for this group. It is Malcolm X, yes. All right, 19, who started the Black Power movement? You remember his name? Stokely Carmichael. All right, 20 says, this group, led by Bobby Seale and Huey Newton, advocated self-defense against white violence. What group did they start? Black Panthers. Good. And I know some of these are cut off, so I'll just tell you the numbers. So that's question 20. It's Black Panthers. 21. Which civil rights leader was killed in 1964 by a rival member of his own group? Malcolm X. 22. Which leader was killed in Memphis, Tennessee in 1968? Martin Luther King Jr. 23. Who was the assassin? This guy goes by all three names too. James Earl Ray. And last question, 24. Who was the potential president and civil rights supporter who was also assassinated in 1968? Bobby Kennedy. Bobby was his nickname. Robert, yeah, is his formal. We need to be formal with it. So Robert Kennedy. All right, you should be done with your study guide. Those were the last few questions. Now I need you to grab your packet, please. All right, we got a few more pages to bust out in your packet, then review and then get that quiz. Okay, so we got to take care. Here's what we're going to do first. We're going to do 25-3 first. Guided reading, 25-3, and then we'll move on to the other ones. All right, here we go. Number 1, where did nearly 70% of African Americans live in 1965? I'm being kind of generic on this answer. Large cities. Large cities. We see most African Americans are living in large cities in 1965. Number 2, what groups of people and or businesses refuse to rent or sell to African Americans? And it mostly is middle and upper class Americans. That's your answer. Write that down. Middle and upper class Americans. Number 3, how did the gains of the civil rights movement contribute to the frustrations of African Americans living in urban areas? What are most people going to be frustrated about? They haven't seen what? Change. There you go. Write that down. They have not seen change. Number 4 says, where did the worst of the 1960s, or where did the worst riot of the 1960s occur? And what were some of the results? We talked about a couple. One of them was talking about today in the summer of 1966. But I would probably reference Montgomery, Alabama, from what we talked about last week. Montgomery, Alabama, 1964, what they refer to as the Bloody Sunday, where we see over 70 individuals end up being hospitalized from the violence that breaks out. All right, we're going to skip 5 and 6. We just didn't talk about it. We didn't take time to talk about it. We're going to move on to number 7. Number 7 says, why did some African-American leaders become critical of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s nonviolent strategy by the mid-60s? Again, I know it's a little bit of a repeat philosophy, but why? Why are they frustrated? They feel like, right, yeah, I feel like they're not accomplishing anything. Again, still not seeing change. All right, number 8, who explained Black power to mean controlling the social, political, and economic direction of the struggle for equality? Who is it that's going to push for the Black power movement? Stokely Carmichael. Number 9, what organization is going to be led by Elijah Muhammad? Black Nation of Islam. Well, Malcolm X will be the spokesperson, but Elijah Muhammad, I guess you could say he's the guy kind of behind the scenes, and he's letting Malcolm X be, yeah, the face of it. There you go. Yeah. All right, we're skipping 10 and we're going to 11. Number 11 says, what was one of the Black Panthers' main beliefs? Anybody? Well, yeah, pushing for equal rights. Using self-defense. There we go. Use self-defense. All right, last 3. We're going to skip 12 and we're going to do 13, 14, and 15. Number 13 says, how did the civil rights movement change by the late 1960s? We see more riots and violence and assassinations. Number 14 says, what happened as a result of the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.? Riots break out across the United States. And number 15, what was the key element of the Civil Rights Act of 1968? That was the last one that we looked at. What was it specifically talking about? Ends discrimination when buying or renting property. Ends discrimination when buying or renting property. All right, you guys are going to have to help me out just a little bit. The only thing we should have left is the reteaching activity. Is that right? Is that right? unless you've missed a day. If you've been out a day, you might have missed another page. But we're going to go next to the reteaching activity. It says the civil rights movement. It's a matching activity. The civil rights movement tried different strategies to achieve racial equality and integration. Initially, most African Americans followed Dr. Martin Luther King Jr.'s path of nonviolent protests, staging sit-ins, peaceful protest marches, and boycotts, as well as mounting legal challenges to unjust practices. Others grew impatient and lashed out in citywide riots. Some leaders advocated Black power and segregation from white society. All right, so what you're doing is you're matching the quote with either the person or the organization. So see if you can guess it before I tell you. All right, number 1 says, we boarded southbound interstate buses in defiance of segregation laws. Who would have said that? The Freedom Riders. So that's F for number 1, Freedom Riders. Need to know who that group is. It's going to be a quiz question. Number 2, I successfully argued Brown versus Board of Education in order to challenge school segregation before becoming the first African-American Supreme Court justice. Who was it? It is Thurgood Marshall. So number 2 is G. Again, that's another good movie. It's called Marshall, if you ever want to see it. It's a good movie. Number 3, I led a commission investigating civil disorder. We concluded that the nation was moving towards 2 separate societies, one Black, one white, separate and unequal. Oh, we didn't talk about this guy. This is C, Kerner, which gets us into the Kerner Commission. We just didn't have time to get into that one in detail. So 3 is C. All right, number 4. Number 4 says, Blacks, rise up and arm yourselves. Black power will defeat our white oppressors. This is J. Good. Black Panthers. Yeah. Good. Number 5. I took aggressive legal action in order to actively support the civil rights movement. And that doesn't give you a whole lot of information, but it's talking about, you may want to guess? Kennedy, yes, that is E, Robert Kennedy. Robert Kennedy, who's going to be assassinated in 1968. Number 6, we staged sit-ins in restaurants intending to desegregate all public facilities. Good, H, yes, H. Student for a Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, H. Here's a question that's going to be on your quiz today. Where did the first sit-in happen? Greensboro, North Carolina. There you go. Number 7. Who could have guessed that my refusal to give up my bus seat would help launch the civil rights movement? A, it is Miss Rosa Parks. Rosa Parks. Number 8, I defied school desegregation by ordering the Arkansas National Guard to keep 9 African-American students from entering Central High School. We talked about the incident, but I didn't talk about who the governor was, so that was my bad. So this is B. We didn't talk about who he was. So again, that one's kind of my fault. So 8 is B. We talked about the incident. It's talking about the Little Rock 9. Number 9, our goals were simple: desegregate America and register African-American voters. Dr. King is going to be a member of this organization and encourage ministers and pastors. It is L, the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. So L for number 9. Number 10, after leaving prison, I joined the Black Muslims and changed my last name to X in honor of my slave ancestors. D, it is Malcolm Little. Number 11, since 1909, we have supported court case intended to overturn segregation. It is the NAACP. So K for number 11. And number 12, I penned the letter from a Birmingham jail in defense of nonviolent protest. It is I, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. All right, we're not gonna worry about 13. We've kind of talked it out from last week and this week. Let's see. All right, help me out. Did we do, I feel like we did we do the timeline together last week? I feel like we did, but I couldn't remember 100%. Okay, so that should have you finished up with both the packet and your civil rights study guide. If you're turning it in person, make sure your name is on both. Put it at the corner of your table. And as soon as we finish reviewing, I'm gonna come grab it. And we're gonna knock that quiz out of the way. Okay, so I need you to have your desk completely clear. All you need is something to write with. We're gonna review, we're gonna quiz, and we're gonna go ahead and intro and get ready for chapter 26, getting into Vietnam. All right, let's do a little review. Let's make sure you do good today. All right, the good news is, just like last week, short, quick, multiple choice, couple true, false, knock it out, we'll be done, okay? All right, so let's see how you do. A couple review questions from last week and this week. All right, say it again. What amendment gives African Americans citizenship? 14. Which one gives African American males the right to vote? 15. Good. Make sure you have those. You know which one is which. All right, know your court cases. What court case makes segregation legal? Plessy versus Ferguson, 1896. Which one makes segregation illegal?
Brown versus the Board of Education.
Brown versus Board of Education, 1954. Good. All right, let's see this. In what city does Rosa Parks encourage a bus boycott? Bus boycott? I'll give you a hint. It is in Alabama. Montgomery, Alabama. There we go. We got it. Let's see. Ooh, this is a really good one. What year does the Civil Rights March on Washington happen, where Dr. King gives his I Have a Dream speech? What year does it happen? It happens in this year for a reason. It's the centenary of the Emancipation Proclamation. But what year is it? So what did you say? Nope. Nope. I literally think that y'all have like jumped all over this year. 3. It's 3. I didn't hear 3. Somebody said 3. I didn't hear you, I promise. But it's 3. 1963. There you go. 1963. Okay. Alrighty, let's try this again. In which city were protesters met with police dogs and fire hoses? It is another city in Alabama. It is Birmingham, Alabama. Very good. In what city will we have 9 high school students that are starting to integrate a local high school? They're nicknamed after the high school city. Little Rock? Little Rock 9, Little Rock, Arkansas. It's Little Rock. Okay. All righty, let's keep trying. What is the name of the organization that is made up of pastors and preachers that are encouraging their congregations to get into nonviolent protest? That's the SCLC. Yeah, I know, those are confusing. SCLC, and which one is students? That's the SNCC. Yeah, good. All right. Where and when did the student sit-in movement start? Greensboro, North Carolina. When? 1960. Good. 1960. What is the name of the group that rode a desegregated bus through the South? Freedom Riders. Let's see. I think that's it. I'm making sure I didn't skip over one. Yeah, good. Okay. All right, it's all multiple choice. There are some true, false on here at the very bottom. Again, for true, just put T for true, F for false. Please make sure you put your name on your quiz. Any questions? Again, if you're turning anything in paper, make sure you have it out with your name on it. I'll come grab it while I'm throwing your quiz out. As soon as you get your quiz done, I will pick it up from you, and then we'll see how much time we got left and go from there. All right, as soon as you get it, you may begin.